Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Friends Podcast, man. Thank you so much for coming through and listening
Yes,
to us
sir.
today. If it's your first time, thank you so much for coming through, man. We definitely appreciate everybody coming in and listening and, kind of checking out what we have to say, man. So let me introduce
Absolutely.
myself. My name is Matt, and I'm here with my co-host.
My name is Rod. This is the Friends Podcast. So make sure you check us out on all streaming services. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Make sure you also check in at the Friends Podcast on Instagram. Engage, talk to us. We want to hear about your opinions and if you think we tripping.
Yeah, man, we're here. We're here. Just engage with us, man. We're here for sure. And we got to. Usually we do solo podcasts sometimes, where we just kind of chop it up between me and Rod sometimes. But today we have a special guest in the building today, man.
Woo!
So happy to have her in here today. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Erica Elan. I'm a visual artist and entrepreneur, creative consultant. But my primary realm of art is painting. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for
sure.
coming through, man. We got so much to talk to you about art, and you got photography going on. I don't want to. Let me not jump too ahead. Let me not jump too ahead. We'll get into all that. So let's kind of talk about our weeks first. So I guess Ryan, go ahead and go first and tell us about how your week has been so far.
Man, it's always my week first. Let me see. This week it's been all about networking, communicating as always. Um, I went to this new brunch spot called the Kitchen Step in New Jersey. Man, the food was so delicious. I had this eggs Benedict, man, with bacon, and then the hollandaise sauce is what really kicked it off.
Mm.
That shit was so fucking fire. What about you?
um, I always tell you to go first because I never have shit to say. To be honest, like I never really do shit. I'm at home, but actually, the last couple of days I have been going out. Royal Oak, Ferndale area. Going to a couple bars, getting too drunk for no reason. But that's pretty much me. How about you, Erica? What's been going on with you this week?
I've been working a bunch this week. But yesterday I've been working with this pop-up exhibition in LA by an artist, Glenn Caino, who partnered with the Karuk tribe in Northern California. And so I was up there and connecting with a bunch of friends and love seeing kind of the direction that is going. It's going to be up for another at least few months. So if you're in
Okay.
LA, go check out. It's called The Forest for Trees.
Nice. And then, so did you have like stuff for sale, or were you just kind of there to support and kind of stuff like that?
Yeah, so the company that I co-founded is running the whole retail portion of the art exhibition. So I go up there usually on Fridays and kind of check in and connect with people. And it's kind of like a really organic show. So there's a lot of, like, last night was a magic show in the space. It's this huge freaking warehouse that they did all this. They transformed it basically into a forest within LA, and it's really gorgeous. And the magic show is pretty dope. So, yeah.
Wow.
What's the audience like there?
They're like, every day is different, but we get a lot of kids, and it's just such a unique thing because Glenn is this freaking incredible installation artist. And this is kind of a new type of partnership and type of pop-up. Like, have you all ever been to or heard of Meow Wolf? There are these really
No,
experiential. Yeah, it's in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but there are these really experiential art exhibitions. So for this show, you come in and it basically takes you about half an hour to go through the whole thing. And there's these different elements to it. You hear different music. A lot of the elements you can interact with in some way. There's fire that you can control with your hands. So the audience was really a huge range. It's a really fascinating kind of experiment in what immersive art looks like. So it's beautiful. Come to LA, check it out.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. You said it's up for a couple more weeks, you
At
said?
least a few more months, actually.
A few more
It's gonna
months.
be a while. Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. So I guess let's kind of go ahead and talk about Erica. So let's kind of talk about like your beginnings and stuff like that. So where are you from originally?
I'm from Chicago, originally, Midwest. And yeah, I grew up generally being encouraged creatively, but for a long time that didn't look like painting at all. I was interested in a lot of other mediums, whether it was music or photography,
Mhm.
or even like design. And but my senior year of high school, to avoid taking a gym class because I was very unathletic, I took an oil painting class,
Okay.
and that really changed the trajectory of my life because it really resonated with me. And um, went on to college in Chicago and was thinking I was going to study politics and go to law school and all these things, but
Oh
painting kind
wow.
of kept being this way of processing those other concepts and community based ideas that I was interested in. And
Okay.
so the interest in like community organizing, politics, and art kind of kept like wrestling and going back and forth. And they still kind of do to this day. But ultimately, I graduated undergrad with a, a double major in fine art and conflict transformation.
Hmm.
I then went on to be a two-time grad school dropout, law school, and an MFA program. And now I'm in freaking Long Beach, California, and I paint and help run a company and work with a lot of dope brands and artists. And it's a fascinating life, seeing
It's
how it all plays together.
It definitely sounds fascinating. So like when you were like in high school, like a senior in that oil painting class, did you see this for yourself, like where you are right now? Like how far did you see in the future at that point?
Not far at all. No, but I knew that it became a language for me to process through pretty quickly. And
Hmm.
that was interesting to me, because before you try something new, whether it's music or a new instrument or whatever, you don't have access to that realm of understanding necessarily. And so all of a sudden, I had this whole space of like a different way to process what was going on in the world.
Hmm.
So I knew that it was going to open up a new realm of things for me, but I didn't expect to that my life would be so built around it.
I kind of want to talk about along the lines of high school. You said you were making music. What kind of music was
Yeah.
what kind of music was it?
Oh, I'm talking to musicians. Oh, it. I'm like so nervous to talk about music because I'm not a musician, but it was really formative for me. I think in learning how to um, express creatively. I had played piano since I was like 4.5, and I always hated like what do you call it, classical piano. Now I have a really deep appreciation for that, but
Hmm.
learning in that structured environment never went very well for me. So finally I found a teacher that just let me write and do play by ear and do what I wanted to do and just play when I wanted to play. um, so I think again, like this idea of languages of communication and creating, for me, even though I wouldn't call myself a musician, that was the most formative piece of my childhood understanding of what it meant to create and to be open to like hearing things differently or expressing things differently. So, yeah. So I still write a little, but it's like a lot of like soundscape kind of very basic, more emotive, maybe boring things.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
feel like that kind of stuff translates though? Like, cause you're great at painting like visual art. Do you feel like it translates between like different art spaces? Like, can you go write a great verse? Or can you go? I mean, you're a photographer too. Like, how does that kind of mesh together? Being a creative.
Yeah. There's definitely a significant amount of overlap. And I don't know exactly how it all meshes together, but I do know that I think my work is stronger or like feels more holistic when I'm utilizing different parts of my creative world, whether it's like writing words or writing music, painting, doing photography. all those, they like feel like different branches of what it is to be an artist to me. So I feel healthiest and like I'm making my best work when I'm utilizing multiple of those spaces.
Okay, I like that. I like that. So do you remember like the first time, like, was it a moment when you were like, damn, I got it, like I got this shit, like when you first painted that first thing, like, was there a moment?
Oh, I am so not confident about my work generally.
Really? Oh wow.
That's surprising. Like
But
your art's really good.
well, thank you. But interestingly enough, because you guys are connected to Michigan, have you
Mhm.
guys heard of Art Prize
No, I
in
have
Grand
not.
Rapids, Michigan? It's this huge. They like transformed the city into like this. It's kind of controversial. There's been a lot of weird stuff since because it's run by this family, the DeVosses, and they're super sketchy.
Oh
Whatever.
God. Yeah.
Anyways, years ago,
Uh-huh.
I right after I graduated college, I did this piece for that show, and I do remember feeling like it was interesting. Like, so basically, they take the whole city, and the whole city, every restaurant and every school and church and whatever is transformed into an art gallery for
Hmm.
the weekend, and people come and visit and like vote on stuff. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept, but they're just messy about it.
Hmm.
Um, but I showed at this church there, and it was a really beautiful space. You like apply to get into these different spaces. And I remember being up there and being like, I loved being able to be by the work and see how the work encountered people. It was one
Hmm.
of the first times I got to see so many different people roll through and like stand and be present with this painting I had worked on for, however many months before.
Hmm.
At the time, it was the largest piece I'd ever made. And yeah, I think that moment was like, oh, all these hours spent kind of in isolation and not feeling super confident about what it means to be a painter in the world and be putting dirt on a piece of wood and
Hmm.
calling it significant, whatever,
Yeah.
trusting its significance. I saw how it was connecting with people in different and unique ways, and that felt really hopeful, and in whatever way it felt successful.
What was
So
the name of
that
that
was
art?
exciting. That was called Resemblance.
Okay.
It was of my friend Maggie, who I grew up with.
And
Hmm.
also, what was the responses that you received during that time, and how did it affect you and your heart?
Yeah, I think I was really moved by watching people actually spend time with the work, like to
Hmm.
like sit in front of it. And that's a concept I think a lot about in the making of it. Like I'm sitting here with this freaking work for, 75, 150 hours, whatever it is. And that's an important part of the process for me, this kind of meditative trust of that time and space. Um, but then to watch other people sort of have that like pause and experience in a day that's really busy and they're seeing a bunch of art and whatever,
Yeah.
but like to actually be present with the work and take it in for something beyond just like, oh, that's a cool painting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they actually had, whether it was like an emotional or spiritual experience with it. That
Like they're crying.
is, I mean, people have cried. I've had probably the coolest response to my work was in Seattle. I was showing with it was my first solo show with
Okay.
this great gallery up there, Treason Gallery. And somebody who was houseless, lived outside, came into the show,
Hmm.
and they walked around the space. And I paint all people I love, like in my life, like my friends. And they walked around and they're like, these are all angels. These are all angels. And they're just looking at the work.
Wow.
And then they laid down in the middle of the gallery and they just
Wow.
laid there looking around. But that is the most, that's such an honor for anyone to have that experience.
Hmm.
And and not everyone freaking has that experience with my work. Everybody's, it's different for everyone, but it's hopeful for me to think that like, anything that we're all of us are creative. Anything that we create can move somebody or like shift somebody's mental, emotional, spiritual space, just by its presence and by its own existence in the world. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And kind of going to that spiritualness that you were discussing, we see that you had a podcast. We want to get a little bit into that. It was the Create Well podcast, and you talked about spiritual bypassing and the tendency to use spiritual explanations. So we want to get a little bit into that, and we thought that was very like interesting, like concept. We haven't really heard that.
Yeah. Raye and I. So Raye and I have a podcast. Raye's an amazing musician. You guys have to hear her music.
Definitely.
But yeah, we wanted to do that one because it's something I think we encounter a lot, and I think, I mean, I'm sure you guys encounter it too. It's just that's like a name for what it is, right? Spiritual bypassing. But I tend to see it a ton in the white community of like, there's this, and in like the wellness community of health and well-being and spiritual well-being, this ability to to cover up things that are real and difficult and challenging with some type of spiritual explanation rather than facing the important reality of what's happening.
Right.
So, even just like, I think on our podcast about it, we talk about the phrase like everything happens for a reason. Saying that to somebody can actually be really detrimental, especially when our world is so built on oppression and like structures of oppression. Things don't necessarily happen for like some sort of spiritual reason. They can often, most of the time, happen because the world is built in a way, like in ways of power structures that allow some people access to some things and other people not access to certain things, or some people safety in some situations and other people to not have that. And I think as artists and as creatives, I see this a lot with peers who have a lot of privilege in art spaces, that there's this like, wow, like I was born with this talent, and like I've sold all these works and I work with all these galleries, and it's like they can easily, whether that's spiritualizing or just not acknowledging privilege, I think they kind of run together often. We can forget that there's actually like different structures that determine how life rolls, and by spiritually bypassing, we don't address the brokenness of those systems and realities.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, so why is that dangerous? Is it because we're just not acknowledging the issues? Is it like we're just backsliding, or we're just not really getting anywhere if we just like positive about everything all day?
Right.
Like, is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, the toxic positivity idea too, of like, I think you
toxic
named it.
positivity.
Like,
okay.
Toxic positivity. Well, it's like, yeah, I think it can be dangerous because it can keep us from challenging structures of the world that harm people. And sometimes just on a personal level, it can keep us in our own life not addressing some things that really do need to be addressed, because we're, kind of washing over them with a false positivity. So I'm all for being positive, but I think if it means that we're not addressing what's really going on and addressing the roots of things, then it can be really harmful to both ourselves and the people around us. So
I agree. Yeah, because like Rod said, this is like a pretty new concept to me. But my initial thought was like, okay, you could be either super positive all the time or super negative all the time. I feel like if you just sit back and analyze the situation, what it is, just react how it is. Don't try to always push it and make it, oh, everything's fine. Like, that meme where like that rat or that bear is just sitting there and like in the fire, and it's like, oh, it's fine. Like we can't do that. So yeah.
Is it a bear or is it a dog?
It is a dog. It's a dog. Yeah.
it's a
It's definitely a dog. I just remember the fire, to be honest. But Yeah, definitely interesting. You guys have some interesting topics. So like kind of talk about like how that even came about. Podcasting. Was it just something like do you just love to talk or like how did you guys like come up with the idea for it?
Yeah. So we met like right before the pandemic hit. We both moved to Long
Hmm.
Beach, California, and we
Okay.
had known about each other's work and whatnot, and ended up connecting on a photo shoot for the company I work with, and um, started just spending a lot of time together and processing both of our. So she's kind of like Americana folk musician. I'm obviously a painter, and so we would have these like long discussions. We would work out in the morning together, and we'd have these long discussions about
Hmm.
our trajectory as creatives and as young women in our specific industries and the challenges and the fun parts and whatever of those those journeys.
Hmm.
And initially, we wanted to actually write about it. We wanted to write a book, and that is pending. But we
Okay.
thought, oh, it would be dope, especially pandemic hit. It would be dope to, talk about these and offer a resource to other young creatives, talking about the intersection of entrepreneurship, wellness, and creativity in a way that we never had access to
Dope.
or we never heard other people talk about. So it's been really fun. And we get, like you guys, we get to interview our friends and like celebrate the work that they're doing. And so
Hmm.
it's such a fun way to connect with people.
You seem very introspective. Like you spend a lot of time just thinking about your actions. And does that reflect in your artwork a lot? A lot of times.
You tell me.
It seemed like it does, but I wonder. It's like the
I,
meditation. Do you do meditation to get
you
very into your
know,
spirituality?
mm, for me, painting and the movement tend to be my meditation. I'm not very good at like a structured meditation,
Hmm.
um, or
Can you talk about the differences? What is structured meditation for people who don't know?
ooh, I think you know the um, I'm probably a bad person to talk about this because I don't participate in in more structured
Yeah.
meditation, but I know that like at least for me, when I think meditation, it comes to mind kind of sitting there and like trying to not be judgmental of your thoughts and spend some time in silence and breath work and things like that, which I deeply appreciate and see value in. And I'm
Hmm.
not very good at doing it. So I guess that is, and maybe people are going to come at me and correct me for all that, but that's how I see structured meditation. But for me, painting um, is honestly not much different. It just has this other element of what I'm doing with materials and elements in a different way. Dirt, which is paint, and water,
Hmm.
um, and and even movement like getting outside, being by the water. Those things to me, they're the spaces where I like am most conscious of my breath and connection to my body and the importance of like reminding myself of those things and then how my body and my mind connects with the outside world. So I guess that's like a personal practice, but
Yeah, I think that's super dope because it still allows you to be present. It's just in a different kind of way. You don't have to like sit there at
yeah.
home with the whatever they do. I don't know what they do. No disrespect to the to the
No disrespect to the structured
yeah,
meditators.
to the
Yeah.
structured meditators, but
I thought it was like a stillness where you just like completely quiet
Mm.
and you don't think
Yeah.
about anything. You just
See,
mhm.
yeah, like
I don't know. It's kind of hard for me. I've tried it before, but it's just like you gotta, you really have to like really block out everything in your mind, and it's kind
yeah.
of hard to do that. Like when your
Mm.
mind is running a mile a minute, like you really have to like focus and try to do that. Like,
I tried it and
Yeah.
I was like, that was the hardest part to not think about anything.
yeah,
Like it was hard to
Yeah.
not think about me sitting here doing
Yeah.
nothing
yeah,
and just
uh-huh,
be
yeah,
like, man,
Yeah, I think that's why like there's this painter that I met in college. His name is Guy Chase, and he has since passed, but his work mostly he he would just count and do little lines and count all of them in paint, little lines in paint.
Wow.
And to him, that was prayer. And that really made me think about the mark making that I was doing with paint really differently. And I think that's probably why, like, painting to me is an easier space to be less judgmental of my thoughts and be, more present in, because I'm the same. If I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here, I'm breathing, I'm like judging everything I'm thinking about,
Right.
So having that like other element or like movement to be able to engage with is actually way more meditative for me. But maybe I'm just less, evolved than these very good meditators.
Either that or you crack the code. Maybe you just,
Maybe.
you never know. You never know. As long as
It's
it's
true.
working, that's all that matters, So,
Yeah.
so let's kind of talk about, let me switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about like influences when it comes to like people that you're influenced by, as an artist. Like, do you have like any super heavy influences, or do you feel like that may kind of get in the way and maybe like influence you too much to where you're doing the exact same thing as that person? Like, how do you feel about that concept?
I definitely want to hear the artist stories. Like I love like when she like pull in some other artist and what she learned from it.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I have a lot of influences of different mediums. Probably definitely the most influential painter in my life was my mentor over in Chicago, Tim Lowley,
Okay.
who's an incredible representational artist. He mostly paints his daughter Tema, and I could say a lot about him, but I would just recommend looking at his work. It's really profound. And the main thing I learned from him was the pursuit of humility in making, and humility towards the subject of who you're painting when you're painting people, because painting people comes with a lot of baggage as far as the history of what it means to paint people and the power dynamics of it. So,
Can I stop you there?
yeah.
So, like, do you
Yeah.
mean when you say that? Do you mean like how back in the day it was like the people that were usually painted were like the upper
Mhm.
class, the upper crust of whatever? Is that what you kind of mean when you say that?
Yeah, that's a huge component of it. I mean, who had access to getting paintings of themselves was people in power, and usually utilizing that power for whatever means they chose. I mean, freaking back before, we had photography and videos and stuff, paintings were used as weapons of war too. Like you were communicating massive political ideologies through what was being portrayed visually. And so the history of painting is messy, and like who is a successful painter is always, obviously a very like, and I say successful painter in quotes, like Eurocentric, power centric, white supremacist lineage. And so circling back to what I learned from Tim is this, to take all that into account and to not, spiritually bypass all of that and be like, we
Yeah.
moved on from all
Yeah.
that. But yeah, especially when you paint people, like the pursuit of humility is really the most important piece of it. So yeah, Tim would be a huge painting influence. I don't know, I'm influenced by tons of musicians. Olafur Arnalds is a soundscape artist that has accompanied most of my paintings. Right now, writing wise, Adrienne Maree Brown is like blowing my mind and one of my all-time favorite thinkers and creatives. If you haven't read Pleasure Activism, it's my new favorite book. It's freaking incredible, especially
Pleasure
for artists,
activism.
I think.
Pleasurism.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting.
Who
Yeah.
wrote that? Like I actually want to look that up. Pleasurism.
Adrienne Maree, no, Pleasure Activism.
Pleasure
And it's by
Okay.
Adrienne Maree Brown.
Okay.
It's so good. It's so good. The Body Keeps the Score is another book that's really influenced my work about how our bodies are major components for healing. Yeah, those are some of my influences.
Cool.
Nice.
So I kind of want to go into like the process of how you
Hmm.
create art. Do you listen to music, or what do you do to get in the mode of making art?
I usually light a candle and kind of like
What scent?
define the space by that. It changes all the time.
Okay.
I wish I was like, oh, it has to be eucalyptus mint, but no, it's always changing. It's whatever's in the room.
Okay.
Um, but usually light a candle. I think like connecting to like in my ideal world, I'd probably have a studio outside on a lake somewhere and like be present with elements already. But because I live in Long Beach in a studio apartment, having like the element of fire, I think, is kind of like a grounding piece of everything for me. And then you have to do like, there is this whole like ritual of like setting up the paint and getting out the water and figuring out what brushes you're going to use that day. So kind of like finding the space like that is helpful for me in framing that I'm going to be like focused and present. But then
Hmm.
I listen to a lot of music, like I said, a lot of soundscape because sometimes the words kind of mess with me and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I listen to a lot of friends' music too. Um, and yeah, I'm like, I'll listen to pods also. And then I take stretch breaks. I think that's the most important part of my practice. Because when you're sitting looking at a painting for so many hours, you need to move in between it. So
And like, do you work on multiple works at the same time, or do you kind of just try to focus on, let me finish this first?
I definitely work on multiple pieces at the same time. Or when I'm doing my best work, it's because I'm working on multiple pieces at the same time.
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Interesting.
What's that stretch break like? Is it you
I just
have like,
move.
oh, okay. I know, like, well, like,
What kind of question is it?
Well,
no,
like, no, I think that's a really fair question. No, because, and this is why, and pleasure activism talks about this, Body Keeps the Score talks about this. I
Mhm.
think as creatives, I would venture and say this goes for musicians too. We don't think about the importance of our bodies in how we're making work. And oftentimes we can find ourselves sitting for long hours during the day. And I'm like hunched over, like painting, like super unhealthy for your back and your body.
Mhm.
And many years ago, I forget what artist talked about it, but she talked about how she, during her painting process, thinks about her posture all the time. And it's really improved her studio practice. And it was like this light bulb went off for me that like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
not actually taking care of or acknowledging the importance of my body in making this work. So now I'll like, I mean, literally, like, I mean, like stretch like an athlete or whatever would, or like yoga ish stuff, even though it's not real yoga. um, but just to like re-engage with what my body's doing, I'll lay on the floor because that's really good for your posture and just like look at the work for a while.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be able to paint for the hours that I paint for if I wasn't acknowledging my body in it. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, kind of talk about, I don't know the actual word for it or like how to even frame it, but like, so you know how like it'll be like oil on canvas, or it'll say like basically the canvas that you use, and the however you put the paint on there. Can you
Yeah.
talk about your process on like where you began? Like, I know you took that class, you said oil painting in high school, like, but do you still do oil on canvas, or like how is that process transferred or
Yeah.
progressed over time?
And what about some different like paint styles? Have you
Yeah.
tried other ones, or is oil the main
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. So I first jumped into traditional oil painting in high school. And I think that laid such a good kind of intense groundwork because oftentimes you start with acrylic, which is a little bit more, it's not more forgiving. It's actually kind of harder, but
Hmm.
it dries really quickly. So there's less surprise with the process of painting with acrylics. It's
Okay.
water based. Um, so starting with oil, I think let me like opened up the realm of possibility for me really quickly with what paint can do. And I was initially painting on like canvases, kind of traditional, like the stretched linen, whatever. But when I got to college and I had this mentor, Tim, he was painting on all wood surfaces. And immediately, the first time I painted on wood, like a hard, natural surface, it felt like an important shift, and I wasn't going to go back because I really like pressing the paint into the surface. And with canvas, you have too much bounce for that. So my process is really messy. A lot of representational, or like people will say my work is realist. A lot of those artists are very well trained and really understand color theory, and they can paint in this way that's called alla prima, which is basically like you see, you know, the right side of the nose and it's this particular color, and so they'll mix the color and they'll paint that one spot and it's perfect, and they'll kind of feather it out, and that's how they make this really realistic looking work. For me, I don't know how to paint like that. I paint in like 50 layers to get to the point that it's at. So working on wood allows me to not only like grind the paint into the surface, but also I'll like sand layers out. Like, so if you see my work in person rather than like on a computer screen or a little Instagram screen, there's like a ton of layers and like thin layers, but there's a ton of layers to it rather than just, oh, I put the right color down in the right spot. I never put the right color down in the right spot.
How do you
Yeah.
get those thin layers? Like, do you just like really lightly tap it with, whatever you're painting with? Like, how do you get those layers?
I do a lot of, at the beginning stages, I do a lot of scumbling. That's the technical term, which is like a pretty dry brush with a good amount of dry paint. And I literally am like pressing it and kind of digging it into the surface of the painting. Makes a really messy kind of textury look. And then middle of the painting is a lot of washes. So those are really watered down because I use water-based oils, whatever. Watered down layers of oil paint that I'm just like laying over the scumbling layers in different tones in different areas of the painting. And then towards the end, I'm using a thicker paint for a lot more of the details, like bright white highlights and things like that, dark shadows, and yeah.
Okay. You know what that made me think about? I was kind of wondering, like, so I'm sure you have like a huge network of different artists and people that paint as well. Like, how often is it that people are just kind of like not trying to share tips or like like being interactive like that? Is it like, oh, I'm giving up the sauce, I can't tell you that I'm scumbling? You're like, how is that?
They're gatekeeping all the art info.
Yeah.
It depends on the circle you run in there, and that's, to be honest, like the art world is very messy, and I think a generally kind of unhealthy place. It's changing. Like the last few years, a lot has shifted in a pretty cool way. But that if you're like working with like the high end art galleries, or you're really, I don't know, getting a lot of clout for your work, there's definitely a good amount of gatekeeping that happens. And there's a good amount of like judgment of the different processes of other people. There's so many different branches of the art world. So I guess speaking specifically towards the figurative art world, representational work, which is kind of where my work exists within, there are literally different schools of thought of how to create a painting and how to paint people and how to mix color, et cetera, et cetera. And so it gets really, you have to either like go to someone's atelier to learn directly from them. And you have to pay them a ton of money to learn all their special secrets, or you're like cast out by this set of galleries and this set of artists. So it's yeah. That being said, the circle I roll in does not gatekeep, thankfully, and
That's good.
yeah. But it exists For sure. There's a lot of judgment in the art world, and a lot of made up ideas of what art is or isn't, or what's valuable or what's not.
I kind of want to get into the conversation of, do you actually go check out art museums and other people work? And does that inspire you at all? Or you ever look at some work and just be like, man, this is just not good?
Am I making the judgments? No, I love to go and see other people's work. The best is if you can do studio visits and see not only the work people are making, but also like what their space and process looks like. I love that. But I'm trying to think of if there's a time where it's like, this is really bad work. I guess I don't go to a lot of like the blue chip galleries and stuff, the things that are like, selling for multi-millions of dollars. Although, again, in the last few years, a lot has shifted and they're bringing in artists that should be seen more than like the kind of grandfathered in, like, nepotism artists.
Right.
But I would imagine if I went to some of those, there'd be stuff that was frustrating. Sometimes, I'll tell you when I'm most judgmental, I think, of art. Is
Okay.
sometimes when I see public artworks that are just really silly, and I know that they made like tens of thousands of dollars for designing this very bizarre piece that goes in the center of some random city. So, and that would go for like monuments and stuff too, right? Like they're also, most of those are terrible. So,
Yeah.
not a fan of a lot of very expensive public art. That's when I'm most judgmental.
Now, can you let me take it back too? So, like, so you said you're in Long Beach right now, in the Long Beach area. Like, what made you choose that area? Did you, kind of do research on it before, or did you just kind of like plop down there just randomly?
It's pretty random.
Random. Okay.
Yeah, I was on the road for a while. I thought I was going to be in LA. I was like, I'm going to go to LA and try out being a painter and whatever. Felt like my work could resonate in LA, and I very, very accidentally ended up in Long Beach, and gratefully so, because I think if I had landed in LA, I would have been gone after my lease was up, my first lease or whatever. But Long Beach is really different. It's super low key, really community oriented, super good people and good food and things that I value. So it's been great, and I'm right by the water, which has been important for my work.
Yeah, definitely, probably a lot of beach time and stuff like that.
I would definitely say my time in California, Long Beach was one of the most exciting places I went to. What kind of food did you
Yes,
eat
when were
there?
you in Long Beach?
Oh, this was
Ooh.
probably I was in Long Beach probably about a few years ago. Well, my father,
Yeah.
used to live out there in Westminster, so I took an Uber out there and I just checked out the scene and things of that nature.
Yes. No, they've
But
got great food. Honduran food. They have a really good vegan Korean place.
are you vegan?
Some of the street tacos. I'm not. I'm like mostly veg, but it's like bomb whether or not you're vegan.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And yeah, the fruit on the street is great too. So I'm a fan.
Oh, let's see. So let's talk about like networking and stuff. So how did you even build your community? So was it just like literally, people that you saw on Instagram? You like, oh, I like them, so let me DM them right quick, and then kind of, build a relationship like that. Was it like in person? Like, how was that for you?
Like as far as creative community goes.
Yeah, like as far as your creative community, people that you just around all the time and kind of, build off of.
Yeah. Yeah, I am a big proponent of like, I admire this person's work, I'm just going to reach out to them.
Okay.
I do that a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I think we don't tell each other enough how significant and valuable the things that we contribute to the world. Like
Hmm.
somebody making a piece of work that moves me, I want to tell them. So I do a lot of like cold reach out, and that has led to some really great friendships.
Okay.
But generally too, I mean, pre-pandemic, would go to a bunch of art shows, go to, hear music and be able to connect with people and network in that way and build real community in that way. And then the other work that I do with entrepreneurship, I've gotten to make a lot of great connections with as well. That translates over into my creative community too. So, yeah.
Super dope, super dope. So kind of talk about like what the future holds for Erica. So like, what do you see, or like, what do you have going on this year? Like this year, next year, like what's about to be popping in the future for you?
Um, this is fun timing to talk about because, to be honest, over the last like 4 years, I haven't been investing in painting a ton.
Mm,
Different realms of my artistry I have been super busy in and really enjoying, but painting has been kind of a difficult piece to come back to and continue to engage with.
mm,
So over the last like month, I've been making more time and space for painting than I have in years. So
nice,
I'm
nice.
excited to be like back in somewhat of a rhythm with painting in particular, and do have I'm working on, I don't know that you could say it's a new body of work, but a new grouping of work that ideally I'll find somewhere over the next year to have a show around LA or Long Beach, and have some possible routes of that. So we'll
Okay,
see.
dope. I know you said the book may be
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah.
So okay.
I
Yeah. Ray Saragosa and I, who run Create Well podcast,
Mm-hmm.
are working on a book version of a lot of the topics that we cover in the pod.
Mm,
I
okay.
kind of wanted to go into you were talking about festivals, and I was
Mm,
in a very popular one that I've heard of was the Burning Man.
mm.
Have you heard of that show? And it seemed like it's
I've
a big
heard of
art world.
it. Yeah, it does seem like super. People that go to Burning Man and come back are like, "Oh, this changed my life," and
Yeah, it's the drugs.
seem to really, seem to really resonate with what all goes down.
Yeah.
I have never been. I don't know if I would go, but I do appreciate. And I was talking to somebody about it, I think last week, and like I do appreciate it. It really seems to bring together people that are looking for a creative community, and they find it there. And because we don't have a lot of structures in the world that lead us to those kind of spaces where we can really deeply connect with people in a creative realm,
Mm.
it's pretty unique in that. So I think it can be a really good place for people to build community and feel seen and heard for what they make in the world.
Why did you say you wouldn't go? What's wrong with there?
I don't know. I have my you guys are trying to pull out my judgments of things on here.
Trying to get you canceled.
Trying to get canceled. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not my scene. I'm also an introvert, and like being in a desert with a bunch of people wearing these like, fancy clothes and stuff really sounds stressful to me in general.
Yeah.
And I've never been to a rave. I've never been to a festival. I'm like pretty low key. So I think I would be stressed. That's why I'm not going.
It does sound stressful, and it's in the desert, that hot heat, and like you're outside, like people, COVID.
Yeah.
Like, come on now.
Yes, exactly. After Coachella, everyone was calling it the Coachella cough, even though we all know they had COVID. It's like,
Right.
this is not Coachella cough.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I do. I've heard about that too, but I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of drugs going on. I don't really do drugs like
Mm,
that.
yeah,
Like
me either.
Yeah, I've had
crowds of
Coachella.
people. What'd you say?
I
Yeah.
said I had the Coachella cough twice.
That's all it was. It was just from Coachella.
uh So yeah, I think we can go ahead and just wrap this up here, man. It's definitely been a great conversation with you, Erica. I guess anything you want to leave the
Absolutely.
people with, what do you want to tell the people? I guess like your last final words on the Friends
Also,
podcast.
your socials, Instagram socials, and people where they can reach you and
Hmm.
see your
Oh
art.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. You can find my work on Instagram at Erica Elan. Um, and what would I leave people with? I would just say I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm grateful for you guys for, making the space for creatives.
Absolutely.
The most hopeful thing is the creative imagination. And so the more that we can like imagine new worlds and new realities through what we're, gifted with the ability to do,
Hmm.
um, the more we should, because it's so hopeful in a world that, tends to not offer tons of hope all the time. So,
Who
yeah,
you were
I'm glad
telling?
you guys are doing this pod, and
Yeah,
this is the kind of stuff that brings new things into the world, and that's so important. So,
Yeah.
yep, you can find my work on Instagram. Check it out, and I'm excited to see who you guys interview next. Thank you. Thanks for having
absolutely.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so
So
much for
this
coming on.
is Erica. Make sure you check out her Instagram. Her Instagram is Erica Elan. So it's a lot of dope stuff on there. Yeah, it's very so realistic. So how do you take orders? Do someone just like contact you or
Yeah,
like
that's the real
That's
question.
a real question. So I, to be honest, don't do a ton of commissions, like pretty
Mhm.
rare.
Okay.
But I do have a few pieces available right now, and some prints available on my website and stuff. But
Okay.
um, I always appreciate the inquiries, always appreciate what you would imagine you want to get painted, because it's just an honor for people to even consider my work to create something significant for them. So, yep,
For sure.
you can DM, email, all the things.
Yeah, people definitely hit her up. Just even take a look at her work. Go ahead and gaze at it, try to interpret it, see what she was going for. But that's been Erica. Thank you so much for blessing the podcast, and this has been the Friends Podcast. Man, check us out everywhere. We're streaming on all platforms. Interact with us. Hit us up. Tap in with us, man. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
always.
listening.
Peace and love. Okay. We got it.
Damn, you're not gonna let me outro? Damn. Okay. I know I
Yeah,
was long winded, but damn, I was trying to cover everything.
it's
But
Erica. It's peace. It's love.
okay. Well, that's been the Friends Podcast. I'm gonna keep it short. It's been the Friends Podcast, and we out. Peace out.
Peace.